Now let's get to the main reason why you sign up for this free course, Growing Your 4C Hair. So sometimes, as you can see from this picture, sometimes your hair might be going through shrinkage, right? And sometimes it can be hard to see how long your hair is. So now in this lesson, I'm going to be focusing mainly on this second part, which is length retention, because I've already covered hair growth. I've covered how your hair grows and factors that affect hair growth. So as we can see from the previous lesson, that hair growth, it is largely determined by genetics. It's also influenced by 5 other factors that I mentioned. But the only issue is you actually cannot control most of these factors. So I talked about the weather, I talked about health, I talked about genetics, your age, right? You obviously cannot control your age. But I did recommend a few things you can do though, such as eating healthy and exercising. But for the most part, genetics especially, you cannot control that. So what we're going to be focusing mainly for this course will be length retention, because that's how you can actually grow your hair long. Now, by length retention, I mean mainly breakage control, right? So the reason why for see here, as you can see from my, my own hair here, is that it's very kinky, it's very curly, and it feels dry very often. And so as a result of that, it'll break very often as well. So even though your hair is growing constantly, right, from the root, but the ends will break, right? Because our hair, even though it looks tough, it looks hard, but the reality is that it's actually very fragile, and that's why it's almost, for some ladies, it's very difficult to grow their hair long because the hair is, just so fragile, it breaks very easily. And I had the same hair texture as well, right? Very fragile, breaks very easily. You have to be careful with the way you handle it, the product you put in it, and everything, right? So you want to make sure that you control breakage. So in this lesson, I'm going to be talking over 8 main ways that you can increase length retention so that you can grow your 4C hair. So the first thing you want to do will be to keep your natural hair moisturized, right? Because like I said earlier, right, our hair feels very dry very often. So I have created this 7 days moisture retention regimen. It is completely free of charge. If you sign up for this challenge or for this course, you should have received this regimen completely free of charge, or you can also grab it from my blog, coilsandglory.com. All right, so it's crucial that you keep your hair moisturized at all times so that your hair doesn't feel too dry too often to the point that it'll break off, right? So when your hair, when it's soft, that means it's going to be flexible and it's less susceptible to breakage, right? And if your hair is, isn't breaking as often, what's going to happen? Your hair can actually grow long, right? You can retain more length. You can retain more length, okay? So the next thing you want to do to increase length retention will be to do frequent protein treatment. So I love to use the Afoji two-step protein treatment, and this treatment is recommended, that you do it every 6 weeks. And what I usually notice after doing this treatment, it's quite weird, is that my hair, for some reason, will start absorbing moisture much longer, right? As absorbing much longer. And I do have another course which I will be talking about towards the end of this program, moisture retention blueprint, where I talked about how dry hair occurs, right? What happens to the hair and why your hair feels dry very often. And I go into the science of that. So this protein treatment, it'll repair your hair, make it stronger, and that way it can't break up as much, or you can reduce breakage by doing regular protein treatment. So I do have a blog post on the blog. You can just type in protein deep conditioners and it'll bring up this blog post. I recommend the top 5 protein treatments that I recommend for the hair. All right, the next thing you want to do will be to protect your hair with protective styles. Now, there are so many different descriptions to protective styling, because I mentioned earlier that, when my hair was relaxed and I would always protective style it, always put it in some sort of a protective style, my hair just never grew, right? So just to keep in mind that You don't always have to use extensions. You don't always have to braid your hair for 10 weeks at a time, 3 months at a time, just to grow your hair. You can just do low manipulation hairstyles such as twists, buns, flat twists, very easy hairstyles that will protect your hair from the damages in the environment, and it'll also help you to retain moisture longer, because when your hair, when it's in twist, right, it'll hold on to moisture longer than when your hair looks something like this, right, when it's loose, right, because the moisture can evaporate much faster, and also you can have a lot of tangles and knots, right, because your hair, it's left loose. But once in a while, it's okay to wear twist styles and whatnot, right? But to increase length retention, you want to make sure that your hair is in some sort of a protective hairstyle. Now, the next step will be to practice protective handling. Now, this might be very new because it's something that I created actually, because nobody talks about this. It's just a term that I just created. So practice protective handling. Now, this is very crucial for type 4 hair, especially type 4C hair, because like I said earlier, even though our hair looks very tough, it's actually very weak, very weak. And so that's why, again, you can watch some YouTube videos where you see some YouTubers just combing through their hair with like very tiny combs. They are always changing up their hairstyles, but their hair, for some reason, will still grow, right? But then our hair is definitely not like that, right? So we have to be very protective with the way we handle our hair. By that, I mean the way you wash it, the way you detangle it, the way you style your hair. So for me, most of the times I leave my own natural hair out, and I dread going to the stylist, right? Because most hairstylists, I've only found one so far who is actually a natural hairstylist, and you can tell, based on the way she handles my fussy hair, right? But most hairstylists, even though some of them might even have fussy hair, they do not know how to style fussy hair or even how to handle fussy hair. So what I need to do now going forward, even though I've been natural for close to a decade now, is to always blow dry my hair before going to get a style, because otherwise it's just a nightmare, right? Unless obviously the hairstylist is a natural hairstylist, then I don't have to do so much to my hair before going, right? So always, always, always be protective with the way you handle your hair so that you can reduce breakage and grow your hair longer. So the next step will be to trim your ends often. And I actually have a blog post about this as well. You can just look up hair trims on my blog and then it'll pop up. So what's going to happen is that over time, the ends of your hair will become thin, right? And I explained this in my course, Moisture Retention Blueprint, which I will talk about towards the end of the course as well. So I talk about your cuticles, what it looks like when it's fresh out of your scalp, and what it looks like a few months or years after it has grown out of your scalp. But this course, it is mainly hair growth. So your ends at the very end, because you have to comb your hair, style it, put it into different hairstyles, the ends of your hair will split. And the worst part about that is that once it splits, it separates into two, it'll keep splitting. And the best way to stop that will be to just trim your hair. Now, if you have a hair texture like mine, my hair texture unfortunately has to be trimmed every 3 months. So your hair has to be, you can set up a schedule to trim it, or some naturals might only trim the hair once a year. I wish that was my hair. Some naturals will only trim it when they notice that their ends feels rough, it feels dry, and it breaks, right? So how do you know when it's time to trim your hair, right? Whenever you style your hair and you notice any tiny pieces of hair on the floor, you notice that your hair is always tangling, it's always forming knots, it's dry, it's harsh at the end of it, then that's when you will know it's time to trim your hair. And you can trim your hair at home, but I'm going to recommend going to a natural hair stylist to trim your hair, because they can actually see where to trim and how much to trim, right? But again, because you want to grow your hair long, you don't have to trim so often, and you can just trim up just a little bit. But again, it's best to go to a professional. By professional, I mean like an actual natural hairstylist if you have one. So the next step will be to protect your hair at night. Now, at night while you are asleep, you have no control over hair growth and length retention. Why? Because you are asleep, girl. So to ensure though that your hair will stay in its optimal state, it's not gonna tangle, it's not gonna break, and it'll continue to grow while you are asleep, it's best to just protect your hair in a satin bonnet, or you can sleep on a satin pillowcase, right? For me personally, whenever I can, I love to wrap my hair at night with a silk scarf, right? So that way, my hair can stay in one place and it'll stay protected as well. All right, the next tip, the seventh tip, will be to have a hair growth regimen. Now, this is going to be a very quick part because I believe this is like a different class on its own, but I just wanted to get into the whole hair growth course. So, hair growth regimen. Now, you probably downloaded the moisture retention regimen, and you can use that as a template to create a hair growth regimen. I think I'm going to create a program or a masterclass or a workshop of some sort to show you how to create a hair growth regimen, right? So a hair growth regimen is pretty much a plan that you're going to put into place that will help you to keep track of your hair growth, right? So this means knowing what products you use in your hair, knowing how those products are interacting with your hair, and you can also keep a hair journal, right? So that you can always keep track of what's working, what's not working, what how long your hair has grown in the last 30 days. And the last tip on how to increase length retention will be to set a goal, right? Set a goal, right? And then you want to make sure that you track it monthly, not daily, but monthly, right? Now, you want to set a realistic goal though, right? Because if your hair grows slowly, so they say that the average hair growth rate is about half an inch to 1 inch or so per month. So depending on your genetics, it can be more than that, it can be less than that, right? But you want to set a realistic goal, right? So I think a realistic goal will be 6 inches in 1 year, right? So you can grow your hair 6 inches this year, right? And then you want to make sure that every month or every 2 months that you are tracking it by taking pictures, and you can also measure it with a ruler, with a tape measure, or you can use a length check t-shirt. All right, so that concludes it. That concludes this part of the course, this lesson. Now, in the next lesson, I'm going to be answering some popular, some frequently asked natural hair growth questions. All right, so if you have any question that relates to this lesson, don't be shy to leave it in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.